Good morning, welcome to Black Country Week with myself, Ian Marrey and Eve Bennett, and welcome to Jenny Wilkinson from the Liberal Democrats. Good morning, Jenny.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me on this morning. It's great to talk to you and your listeners.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Over the last few weeks, we've had a number of candidates for the PCC and the Combined Authority Mayor, and we want to get everybody on before the elections, which it does look like they are actually going to happen in May.
Yes, yeah, it's a bit of uncertainty for a while, but we seem definitely to be moving towards a 6th of May election now, so that's good.
So let's talk a little bit about yourself first, Jenny. I should probably let you know that you weren't slated to stand if the elections had happened this time last year. So a bit of a whirlwind, an unexpected introduction to the mayoral politics.
Yeah, that's right. So our previous candidate, Bessie Nielsen, who also stood last time, she needed to step away due to personal circumstances. So I actually had a conversation with her last summer now, where she sort of suggested that I might be a good person to step in.
Yeah, you always worry about those conversations, don't you?
I've got an opportunity. I'm sure.
I've got a good idea. Why? Okay. So, a Liberal Democrat. So, how long have you been involved in politics?
I still think of myself as fairly new to politics, although actually my fairly new is about 5 years now, a little over 5 years, so not that new after all. But funnily enough, I think I would previously have said I actually wasn't interested in politics, which now feels like quite a ridiculous statement. And I think I just didn't get that actually politics is about every aspect of our lives, and it's about our education system, our healthcare, how we deal with our elderly, how we treat, those in poverty and in need. Every aspect of our lives is actually, permeated by politics.
Yeah, I was an accidental politician. 2012, I was elected as a paper candidate in the local elections, and I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know what it actually entailed, and what I found out it meant a lot of work. It's a lot of time and a lot of effort. But that's the one thing I did find, is that as I got involved, I saw how much people across the whole communities were doing that I had no idea about. And for me, being an enabler as a politician was really, really important. And in terms of the mayoral role, do you see the mayoral role as being an enabling role for others?
Yeah, I think it is, partly because the mayoral responsibilities are relatively limited, especially in the West Midlands. The mayors have greater powers. So a lot of it is having to work with others and having to get other people to do things, but that's something I guess as I've got more and more involved in sort of a local community, that's what I've found is the best way to work. I think it's really important to actually work together, and I think it's something we can actually benefit from a lot across the region, is to pull different communities together and get input from individuals, from community organisations, as well as from the public sector, and also the private sector has a role to play. And the more we actually bring together and work together, that's where we can really make a difference. And there's lots of great things going on across the region, but there's more opportunities to sort of share those great things and to bring different groups together and start doing things more collaboratively, I think.
I want to sort of kick off the broadish topics we've got today is about post-COVID, because if you're elected as mayor, it's probably going to be your number one priority. Everything post-COVID is going to be everybody's priority at the moment. And I was looking at our local news, and you'd virtually visited the Black Country in January, and you were talking about the decline of high streets. And it's a topic we've discussed on this show many times. In the Dudley borough, we've got like Dudley, which has suffered over the years. We've had multi-million investment coming into Bridie Hill, and you picked up the Stourbridge, which has often been considered to be the more prosperous of our high streets, is also suffering. So in towns across the Black Country, across the West Midlands, what can the West Midlands mayor offer in terms of regeneration post-COVID?
I think again, it's probably comes that thing about bringing different parts of the community together. And I think we really actually need to look again at our high streets and what they're going to look like going forward. They're not going to go back to the high streets that we had, 20 years ago. That's not going to happen. Retail is changing, it is moving online. And so we've got to look at offering a real mix in our high streets. So we should get our town centres and local community centres to be a mixture of housing and housing for everybody, including affordable housing, retail, but looking as well at smaller businesses and small retail, local small businesses that can set up and offer small things. It'd be great to get back to our bakers and butchers and greengrocers and things on our high streets, as well as businesses. And I think there's things like offering sort of drop-in offices, more people are working from home, but having that facility to go to a communal facility, network with other people, as well as leisure. Leisure's going to be increasingly important as well, and sort of green space, and giving people that green environment, which everyone's really learned to value during the pandemic. So we have to just have a different vision of what our high streets would look like. And that's about, in order to do that, we need to talk to people who use them and understand the views of local residents, and then collaboratively, pull those together and create a high street that actually people want to go to, that should be a pleasure to go to and meets people's needs. We don't need to go backwards, we need to look forwards.
We've seen over the last 12 months, the Arcadia Group, some really big high street names that have been around for generations in many cases. They've gone. In our first hour, we were talking about Beatties in Wolverhampton, which looks like now it's going to be converted into residential spaces. Do our high streets need to move away from retail and more towards residential and entertainment?
I think it needs to be a mixture. So I think that there is still a place for retail, but it might look a bit more different. It wants to be an experience to go shopping. So it's going to, but we've still got to have people able to get their basic needs. People still want to be able to have a local shop where they can pick up their day-to-day essentials, but then that can be mixed with other facilities. I think we'll still see, there's been a flurry of coffee shops arriving on our high streets, and I think that's going to continue. But yes, mixed with other experiences, so that people might they might go to their local high street, grab some lunch, from a sort of pop-up street vendor, go and look at what's going on for their kids, having some kind of play areas, or interactive entertainment. Great to see more arts, and arts and creative spaces in our high streets as well. So I think it's a mixture. There's still a place for retail within that, but increasingly, especially with the pandemic, it's just really accelerated people more and more buying things online. But people do still sometimes want to go and get physical things as well. So it's got to be that blend.
Yeah, you can't buy ice cream online. Exactly. I found that out. One of the things that the pandemic over the last 12 months has highlighted is there are still gross inequalities in our society, and this is mirrored in the West Midlands. There are many areas that could be classed as being left behind and are being left further behind. What sorts of things would you like to see implemented? Things would you like to see changed to address those inequalities?
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute tragedy that we have, still one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we have so many people in poverty, and more people are slipping into poverty. So, and the pandemic has really, I think, shone a light on that. I don't think it's caused it, but it's really shown how much disparity there is across our communities. So some of the more deprived communities are much worse affected by the pandemic. So poorer households, people of colour, the disabled, a lot more impacted than more affluent groups. And we can't go on with that situation. It's completely unacceptable that there's people who can't put food on the table, can't keep a roof over their heads, can't heat their homes, don't feel safe walking around their communities. So we absolutely have to take action to address that. and make sure that as we grow out of the pandemic, and this is actually a good opportunity to make sure we develop a community that's fair for everybody and that gives opportunity for everybody, so that nobody is faced with that great poverty that we're seeing at the moment.
I know sort of early on in the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about the impact it had on certain communities, certain groups, and I think most people did conclude that the poorest in society were having a greater detrimental impact because of the coronavirus. And there was a lot of talk at that time about, we've got to be different, we've got to do things different in society coming out. I'm not hearing that sort of conversation as much anymore. Are you concerned that we maybe aren't learning the lessons as a society?
Yeah, I think that's right, and that's one of my objectives is to get those discussions on the table. We need to be really looking at ourselves. We have some of the highest death rates in the world, and part of that, there's part of it's to do with how the crisis has been managed, and part of it is to do with that inherent inequality and the situations people are in the first place. And I think it's really sad that as the pandemic has gone on, we've really lost that sense of community. In the early days, back nearly a year ago now, there was that real pulling together and let's all work on this together. And there was people, volunteering, helping at food banks, taking shopping around to their neighbours, that really great community spirit. And we seem to have lost that, and we seem to have reverted to a blame culture and who's at fault and who are these other people who are blaming. And we need to actually be kinder to each other and bring a real sense of responsibility for our communities and responsibility for our lives, and look at our neighbours and think it's not right that people are struggling. People shouldn't be struggling. People shouldn't be unable to feed their kids. We've got to really look at ourselves as a society and take these actions. I think it's absolutely essential. We've got to address that.
Of course, one group that is unfortunately going to face long-term consequences of what's happened over the last 12 months is the younger generation. Many children spend time out of school. Those who have left school, if they went to university, that's been a challenge the last 12 months. And those who are looking to get into the job market, also a challenge. And I'd like to bring my colleague in Eve, who basically is younger than I am, so is better qualified to ask these questions. Eve.
Of course, West Midlands is the youngest area, I think maybe in Europe actually. We have so many bright, talented young people who work very hard and have thrown everything that they have at their education, only to be faced with probably one of the biggest educational crises in living memory. Obviously going forward, that's going to be one of the groups that are going to be in need of most help. So as Mayor, how would you be focusing resources to support those in the young people bracket?
Yeah, thanks, Eve. I mean, there's a number of aspects that I'm concerned about for our young people. First of all, that the education. It's the whole education system has been completely destroyed and damaged like this. And I'm a school governor myself, so I'm seeing the impact that's having on how children and young people are really suffering and are really missing out on that. We still don't have any clarity on what the exams are going to look like this summer. That's still not been decided, and it's only a few months away. It's appalling. So we really need to look at what we can do in education to help catch people up. Obviously, it's particularly challenging for those young people that are now leaving education and just haven't had that experience that so many of their predecessors have had, and that's a real tragedy. And we need to look at clearly young people being affected by highest levels of unemployment as well. That tends to really have a knock-on effect on our young people and getting jobs. So we need to take steps to improve the employment structure and to really give those opportunities around apprenticeships and working with employers to really look at targeting young people. And I'm quite keen to put some schemes in place to really encourage those employers to work with the education providers to make sure that people are getting the skills that they need to find work. And let's not forget about the mental health impact. You know, people's lives are really damaged, and I do feel so much. It's kind of easy for me. I've lived the best years of my life probably, and I've got a stable environment and a family around me. But for young people, it's the time when people are making friendships, making relationships, and those friendships are really valuable and really important to mental health. And your inability to be able to connect with your friends and to, have that sort of social side of life is so important for our young people. And there's so much implications for mental health. We've really got to get some focused mental health support in place. Our mental health systems are poor already, and there's just more and more pressure on them. We've really got to address that.
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose that a lot of the sort of focus when you're coming to tackling things with young people will be working with universities to sort of help offer students the support that they need. But thinking as well, as you're saying, a little bit more long term when they do leave university, trying to get on the property ladder, trying to get into the job market, how will you be looking as Mayor to sort of create a West Midlands where there are those opportunities and where they can sort of look forward to enjoying a stable life and with lots of future prospects?
Yeah, and this is where we really need to talk about the economy. And I think most people on the street they kind of tend to associate the economy with like big business and remote things that don't really affect their day-to-day lives. But really, the important thing about the economy is that it provides jobs, and it actually provides jobs and opportunities for everybody to get on and to progress. And the biggest opportunity coming out of the pandemic is really about the green and environmental sector. And there's a lot of opportunities for the West Midlands with our great history of manufacturing. There's lots of opportunity to be bringing that green manufacturing, electric vehicles, the electric trains, and so on. So there's lots of opportunity to bring jobs in on that side. There's also around I think really around looking at the skills that people need and working with employers, and employers linking in better to educational institutions to actually make sure that young people are getting the skills that are relevant for the industries that we're moving into. So really two aspects of it. First of all, we need to strengthen the economy, and the green sector really provides a lot of opportunities for that in the manufacturing and also in the infrastructure. So we need to be looking at getting all our homes insulated to reduce that impact. We need to be, I'm really keen on looking at the biodiversity and actual green environment. So there's opportunities around that. We need to look at our transport network. And so there's so many areas and things for growth and jobs, but it's then ensuring that the employers are linking in with the educational providers and making sure young people have got the right skills that they need. And also looking at how we train and change and develop over time, because the economy is changing. There's a lot more need for digital skills. So we need to be making sure that young people are getting given all those skills that are really going to help them thrive in our local economy.
And there was some work done by current governments a few years back. I think it may have been some work that came out of the coalition governments in the early 2010s about looking at that link between education and business and trying to get the particular post-16 sector and local businesses, trying to identify what skills that they need. And as you pointed out, we are at the cusp of a green revolution, for sure. When you look at things like sort of move away from petrol to electric cars. We've seen that the extension of the tram network across the West Midlands. Could you as Mayor work, and you talked about this earlier, collaboration, work between education and businesses to identify what it is that young people in our region can contribute and what is needed by businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a crucial role for the Mayor, and the actual Mayor is well placed, because one of the mayoral responsibilities is around skills and adult education, actually. So it's the post-school education. So there's a lot we can do around apprenticeships. I think apprenticeship schemes have been implemented, but they're not working as effective as they could. So we need to understand why that is and really drive forward, why businesses aren't using them as much as they should do. And I think that connection between business and the educational providers is really fundamental. So all our, colleges and universities are bringing out, wonderful, talented young people, but have those young people really got the skills that businesses need? So we need a lot better collaboration. And I think that, the Mayor is really well placed to drive that because of the position of the role in terms of the local economy and in terms of business alongside terms of skills. So I think the Mayoral role is really well placed to bring the two sides together and get better integration and better cooperation to make sure that people are getting those skills that businesses are looking for.
There's been move on to the actual election, because I think this is we've not had an election in times like this before. There's been some criticism this week about the current mayor, Andy Street, sending out a newsletter, paid for newsletter to residents across the West Midlands. The Green Party, I think, came out and said that demonstrates the unfairness of holding an election where political parties are banned effectively from knocking on doors and delivering leaflets. Do you feel, from the Liberal Democrats' perspective, that you are on a level playing field in this election?
Yeah, I do think that's a real challenge. I think, first of all, there's a number of things. I mean, Andy Street's got advantages as being the incumbent in that, he can, he's actually allowed to talk about what he's been doing as well, because that's one of the leafleting restrictions allow for current people in positions to be able to talk about what they're doing. It really does adversely affect the smaller parties, so the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and the independent candidates just do not have the resources to be able to pay for these huge paid for deliveries. So the Conservative Party have a lot of financial backing, and that enables them to be able to, pay the Royal Mail to deliver things across the whole region. Traditionally, we don't have that. And as Liberal Democrats, we really rely on a network of volunteers, and our volunteers are being stopped from being able to deliver. So I do think that's a real challenge and a real issue, is that there is inequality between the ability of the different parties to take action at this moment to actually get there and get their voices out. So we are looking, obviously we're looking at social media, and that's a great platform and an increasingly important platform. But what I'm really struggling with is I actually really want to be out there talking to voters, and that's really difficult to do. So, as you mentioned, I've had like a couple of online conversations, with local residents, but it's not the same as actually getting out there on the streets. Normally we'd be out on the high street, talking to people and knocking on people's doors, and we're really missing out from not being able to do that.
No, there's no doubt it's going to be a strange election. I don't see any evidence that things are going to be, to paraphrase, back to normal by May, and we're not that far away from this election. This year, the mayoral and the PCC elections are both being held on the same day as the local council elections. So I guess one thing you can be sure of is that there will be some campaigning going on in pretty much every locality that has an election. But the mayoral election has suffered over the years, and the PCC elections, of having a low turnout. Have you got a message to people who are listening and who may think that, why should I vote for the mayor? What would you say to them to encourage them to put a cross on that ballot paper?
I think, the first thing I will just say is that clearly the actual running election is challenging. So postal votes are really important. So I'd really encourage everybody to get registered for a postal vote. It's very easy to do, online. Just Google your postal vote, and you'll be able to apply for that really easily. And that makes it a lot easier because you're sitting in your own home. You don't have to go anywhere, apart from to the post box. But you just put your cross on the paper at home. So that saves any worry that people might have of going out to polling stations. Actually, and it's just a lot easier. You can vote over a period of a couple of weeks. So I'd encourage people to do that just to make your lives easier. And I think people don't really understand the impact that local government has on their lives. It really does make a difference as to the facilities that you have available, the approach to how we're looking at developing, community, where the different parties are focused. So I'd really encourage everybody to actually have a look at what the candidates are saying and listen to, things like, your radio show, and there'll be hustings and things going on, so you can see the different candidates and what we're talking about. And I'd really love to see more engagement with politics at a whole level, but particularly local politics, because actually local politics, to some extent, actually really affects people's day-to-day lives. It is to do with, your transport network and how you move around the region. It is to do with what your your local high streets look like. It's to do with the housing plan and where we're putting housing. There's a lot of aspects of it that affect people's day-to-day lives, and the importance of having local government and those decisions being made at a local level close to your area and where you live is really important. So do get out there and make your voices heard and have your say. This is your opportunity.
I mean, I would concur completely with that. I think that politics is pervasive across many areas of our lives, but politicians sometimes don't help themselves by their deeds, words and actions. What sort of mayor would you be? What skills would you bring to the role?
I think there's sort of two aspects I'll talk about here. First of all, my own personal values, I think, have an impact on this. For me, fairness and equality of opportunity for everybody is really fundamental, alongside trust and integrity. I work as a fraud investigator in my day job, so I've got a career of making sure things are being done fairly and properly, and eliminating bad behaviour and fairness and corruption. So for me, I think that's a really important thing. And there is sadly a history of corruption and things amongst our politicians that's really tragic. And to be honest, we're seeing there's some stories coming out of the pandemic about how contracts have been awarded and to people's friends. So that is concerning. So for me, there's a really important value about openness and transparency, integrity. I think that the other thing that's really important to me is to listen to people, and people who are living their lives know what their lives are like, know how things are affecting them, and have actually got some really good ideas about what needs to change to make their lives better. And I think all too often politicians tend to swoop in and come up with these grand schemes of what they think is important, what they want to do, whereas really the starting point has to be listening to people. And I'm really keen on setting up things like citizens' assemblies and things, so that local people have got a voice in what's happening. Things shouldn't be being done to people. It's about collaboration and working with people. And that's really important for me, to listen to what people have to say, use that alongside speaking to the experts and the people who've got the detailed in-depth knowledge of transport, for example, and bringing those things together and properly consulting with the communities to actually build a West Midlands that everyone can be proud of and that's fair for everyone. I really want to give people a voice and to make their voices heard, and that's your opportunity through these elections.
Now, Liberal Democrats, I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, in governments less than 10 years ago, it's been a bit difficult to be a Liberal Democrat over the last few years, drowned out by a two-party system that we seem to have that polarisation. It's 2021. We're on the back of a difficult 12 months. Is this time, do you think, for the Liberal Democrats to rise again?
Yes, I think so. What's important here, I think, is that we need to just really take a look at our society and a look at how things are being run. And it's damaging to have this kind of extreme two-party system. And we saw, in the last general election, certainly the parties are moving further and further to the extremes. So Labour's moving left and Conservatives are moving right, and there's a real opportunity for just let's look at how we can do things differently. Let's look at how we can really empower people. And that's what the Liberal Democrats are about. It's about empowering the individual to live their best lives and to be given all the opportunities to thrive and do whatever it is they want to do. So we're not advocating, this is what your life should look like, this is how you should behave. It's really around the individual and empowering the individual. And I think we can just now, and the pandemic things gives us a real opportunity to reset our country and reset what sort of country we want to be. And for me, that is about empowering people and empowering communities to build, you know, their best community, to build our best West Midlands that we can envisage.
Usually at this stage, as we come to the end of the discussion, I say, you know, and would you like to make your pitch? I think you just did very eloquently. So I'll move on. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on. I mean, it is for a community radio station like ours, it's really great to be able to have conversations, good long conversations with candidates who live at the moment, you know, many miles away from us, and to try and understand what it is that you want to offer. And we've talked today about sort of post-COVID recovery. We've talked on the green. We talked about young people's issues, poverty and the wealth gap. But there is one question that people often find quite difficult, and that is, you know, music. And I asked you to choose a piece of music, and you threw me completely. So what was the first piece of music you asked me to look for?
Yes, well, we started off with a track called "Waving Flags" by British Sea Power, which you didn't have. So,
but see, the thing that threw me, British Sea Power for me were one of the greatest bands never to quite make it. They should have been so much bigger, and I never quite understood it.
Yeah, I have to declare a vested interest because it's actually my brother-in-law's band, which is why I'm very keen to get them every opportunity to be played that I can find.
Well, here we go then. So I might as well do this. Black Country Radio Studios here in Dudley. We'll shortly have a live area. So if British Sea Power fans are coming to do a live gig for us, live on radio, we'll be absolutely pleased to welcome them. I think they've actually played in Stourbridge in the last few years at Katie Michelle's, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was Scary Canary, one of the two. But yes, so I was just so pleased to see British Sea Power as a request, and then so disappointed that we didn't have that particular song. But you rescued me because we did have two British Sea Power. So which one of the two did you choose?
Yeah, well, so I've gone for a track called Bad Bohemian. There's a few things that why this track's particularly important to me. I think first of all, Bohemia is part of the Czech Republic, and I used to live in the Czech Republic for about a year. Spent living in Prague, which was a great year. The title of the track, Bad Bohemian, is actually named after the biography of a writer called Jaroslav Hašek, who wrote a book called The Good Soldier Schweik, which is a very well-known sort of Czech book about sort of insurrection, really. Soldiers in the army and doesn't really like to follow all the army rules and regulations, so it sort of goes against that a bit. And the connection with that from a personal point of view is actually reminds me very much of my father-in-law, who's the father of, you know, a couple of members of the British Sea Power band, and who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But I really sort of associate this track with him and his memory, so it's a real personal song for that. And I think finally there's some really nice lyrics in the song, which is "Don't let us die while we are still alive," which sounds a bit gruesome, but for me, I think there's hope in that, and I think it's saying that, you know, let's keep going, let's keep pushing through. There's so much more to do, and, you know, while we're here, we can do it. Let's be hopeful about the future.
And I think hope and optimism are really important qualities to be put forward at the moment. So from British Sea Power, who have Scott and Hampton Wilkinson, from Jenny Wilkinson, and thank you for the link, that was really nice. This is their song, Bad Bohemian.